Hi there, my name's Annette. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be doing something crazy with some old sheets. And let me reverse the camera here real quick. So I got these old sheets at an estate sale or a thrift store. I really don't remember. I've had them for a bit, but I think they only cost me $1 or $2. And they've got this interesting, print, and the colors are just gorgeous. So I have an idea of what I'm going to do with them, and I'm going to take you along with me. We'll talk about my idea a little bit later, but the first thing I'm doing here is I'm going to line this print up so the print is straight. On the sheets, this print laid in a kind of a diagonal or squares on point type pattern, but I wanted them to be straight. So I broke the sheet down into sections and prepared to cut my strips. I was not being really picky about whether these matched up exactly, but I did want the straight, colorful parts to at least be very close to each other. So I put a pin in the top layer at a certain point, and then I matched that line on the bottom layer where I had folded it over so that I knew at least it was reasonably straight. And here you can see it took a lot of finagling, a lot of pinning, and then shaking it out before I felt comfortable cutting my 5-inch strips. And just to let you know, I only used about half of the one flat sheet. I still have another half plus the whole fitted sheet to make future projects. The next thing I did was find some fabric that I thought might go with this cute bright green and yellow. And I found 2 fat quarter bundles in my stash that I had gotten on sale, plus about 1 yard of this cute stripe fabric that's very bright. So here you see I'm cutting the stripe fabric into 2-inch strips, the width of fabric. For my little fat quarters, I did go through and press those first because I knew that ironing them was going to help me cut them straighter. After pressing those, I took them to the sewing machine and I sewed 2 fat quarters together to make a nice long section that I could cut with the fabric strips out of. To cut these fat quarters into straight strips without some bowing, what I did was line up my ruler on my stitch line, and that gave me this the edge I needed to cut a nice straight 2-inch strip. So to make sure I had a random selection of these strips when I went to sew them to other strips, I mixed them up as you see me doing here. My plan is to make strip tubes here, and I'm going to first sew the stripy fabric to the sheet and then those fat quarter fabrics next. And here you see I'm doing a bit of my favorite thing, which is chain piecing. I'm sewing the stripy strips to my 5-inch sheet strips. After I finished showing on the striped fabric, I did separate the strips, and then I pressed each one open. Next, it was time to start sewing on those strips I made out of my fat quarters. And you can probably see here why I went ahead and sewed 2 fat quarters together, because it did make a nice width of fabric strip for me. After all the fat quarter strips were sewed on, I did take those to the sewing machine and I pressed them all nice and flat. My next step was to start constructing tubes. To make my strip tubes, I put these strips right sides together, and I had the 2-inch strips on the opposite sides. And then I will take this tube and take it to the sewing machine and sew a 1/4-inch seam down both sides of my strip tube. If you're worried about precision, you should definitely pin these before you stitch them. After I reached the end of the strip, I flipped it around and stitched down the other side. I do have a special ruler for cutting strip tubes. In this case, my ruler was not big enough. So I'm going to show you how you can just use a regular ruler with a diagonal line to cut strip tubes as well. A strip tube ruler is basically a 90-degree angle, and then the long edge of the strip tube ruler is what we line up on our stitch line. You can use your regular grid ruler with a diagonal line to do the exact same thing, and that's what I'm going to show you here. And again, my strip tube ruler just was not big enough for the 5-inch +2 +2, just was not big enough to cut those strips for me without losing some of my pretty fabric. But here you can see by taking my regular ruler, I just laid that diagonal line onto my stitch line, and then I've created my 90-degree angle. And I'll show you how I did it. So step 1 here is to lay that diagonal line onto my stitch line and cut the first angle. Next, I slid the ruler to the right, making sure my cut line was going to be slightly inside the stitch on the other side, and making sure that ruler diagonal line is lined up with my stitch line. So the advantage of the strip tube ruler is you do not have to reposition after every single cut, but for these nice wide strips, this works just as well. At the end of most of my strips, I had a little scrap left over, and I went ahead and cut that the same way, just not as wide, just so I would have a little extra square at the end of the day. And now comes the super fun part of opening up these strip tube triangles into squares. And these are so fun to flip around and make different kinds of patterns with. You can have them making diamonds, you can have them making stripes. It's just a lot of fun to see what's going to happen with these strip tube blocks. In my case, I did trim every block, and I did end up trimming them a little bit shorter than I needed to. I did make a couple of mistakes on my strips, so I ended up trimming all my squares down to 10 inches. And that is another advantage of that strip tube ruler, because you make both cuts on the triangle at the same time with your stitch line lined up. Usually your blocks do not need any trimming. I really enjoyed sharing this method with you today, and I hope you liked it too. If you like my channel, feel free to hit that subscribe button, like the video. You can hit the bell icon, you'll get notified when I post new content. As always, have fun when you're sewing, and I hope to see you back again real soon.